South Korea just committed over $7.4 billion to mass produce a fighter jet that didn't exist a decade ago. The KF-21 Boramae is now entering full-scale production, 120 aircraft by 2032, making Seoul the 8th nation on Earth capable of designing, building, and fielding a homegrown advanced fighter. China's J-20 dominates headlines. America's F-35 costs $80 million per unit. But South Korea's bet is different. A 4.5 generation platform built for regional dominance, half the price, and zero dependence on foreign supply chains. This changes the balance of power in the Pacific. Here's why Beijing is paying attention. For decades, South Korea's Air Force flew American jets. F-15KS, F-16S, capable aircraft, but always tethered to Washington's export controls, upgrade timelines, and geopolitical calculations. When Seoul wanted to modernize in the 2010s, they faced a problem. Buying more F-35s would cost over $100 million per jet, with delivery schedules stretching into the 2030s. Developing a domestic alternative seemed impossible. Only a handful of nations had ever pulled it off. In 2015, South Korea made a decision that seemed almost reckless. They launched the KF-X program, later renamed KF-21, with a clear objective: build an indigenous fighter that could hold its own against China's expanding fleet of J-10s, J-16s, and eventually J-20s, without breaking the national budget. No foreign engines that could be embargoed, no software backdoors, no waiting for export approval every time they wanted to upgrade a radar or add a new missile. The central question driving everything that follows is this: can a middle power like South Korea leapfrog into the top tier of military aviation? And does the KF-21 actually threaten China's air superiority in the Pacific? The players in this story are straightforward but consequential. South Korea's Korea Aerospace Industries, KAI, partnered with Hanwha Systems, Samsung, and Lignex One to develop avionics, radar, and weapons integration. Indonesia initially joined as a junior partner with a 20% stake, though funding disputes have complicated their role. The opposing force isn't just China's People's Liberation Army Air Force, which fields over 200 J-20 stealth fighters and is rapidly expanding. It's also the broader regional competition. Japan is upgrading F-15S and buying F-35S. Taiwan is isolated and aging out its F-16 fleet. North Korea's MiG-29s are relics, but their missile arsenal keeps Seoul on edge. By 2022, the KF-21 completed its first flight. By 2023, it was pulling 9G maneuvers and testing live weapons. By early 2025, South Korea's Defense Acquisition Program Administration, DAPA, greenlit mass production, an initial batch of 40 aircraft, with plans scaling to 120 jets by the early 2030s. The total program cost? $44 billion. That includes development, production, and a decade of support infrastructure. For context, that's roughly what the US spends on 400 F-35s. But South Korea gets full intellectual property, sovereign supply chains, and the ability to export without asking permission. Most new fighters chase stealth at any cost. The F-35 sacrifices speed and payload to minimize radar cross-section. The J-20 does the same, trading maneuverability for low observability. South Korea looked at the actual threats they face: North Korean air defenses, Chinese naval patrols near the South China Sea, and Russian incursions, and made a different calculation. The KF-21 is a 4.5 generation platform. It has a reduced radar signature, not full stealth. Its frontal cross-section is smaller than legacy fighters like the F-15 or Su-27, thanks to internal design tweaks, canted vertical stabilizers, radar-absorbent materials on critical surfaces, and serpentine air intakes that hide the engine fan blades from enemy radar. But it doesn't hide weapons in internal bays the way 5th-gen jets do. Instead, it carries missiles and bombs on external hardpoints, 10 of them, allowing it to haul 17,000 pounds of ordnance. That's more than an F-16. Close to an F-15? This matters because in a real shooting war over the Yellow Sea or the Taiwan Strait, you don't need invisibility. You need volume of fire, persistence, and the ability to operate from dispersed airfields under electronic attack. The KF-21 can carry 8 beyond visual range missiles, 2 short-range dogfight missiles, and still have room for fuel tanks or precision-guided bombs. It can stay on station longer, hit harder, and return home without needing a tanker every 90 minutes. The power plant tells the rest of the story. 2 General Electric F414 engines, the same reliable workhorses in the F/A-18 Super Hornet, push the KF-21 past Mach 1.8, around 1,400 miles per hour. Not as fast as a MiG-31, but fast enough to intercept bombers, chase cruise missiles, or escape a furball that's going south. Maximum range? Roughly 1,800 miles on internal fuel. That puts the southern tip of Japan, the northern Philippines, and China's eastern coastline within reach of South Korean bases. South Korea is already developing a Block II variant with conformal weapon bays. By the late 2030s, the KF-21 will be able to carry 4 missiles internally, cutting its radar signature even further while maintaining external hardpoints for heavy strike missions. It's a modular approach. Build the airframe now, upgrade the stealth later. That keeps costs under control and jets in the air while China is still refining J-20 production. Here's where South Korea made a critical decision that separates the KF-21 from every other fighter in its weight class. The jet uses an indigenously developed active electronically scanned array radar, AESA, built by Hanwha Systems. This isn't some licensed copy of an American design. It's a fully Korean system with over 1,000 transmit/receive modules capable of tracking multiple targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 100 miles. That's competitive with the APG-81 radar in the F-35 and significantly better than the mechanically scanned arrays in older F-16s or Chinese J-10s. Radar is the choke point. If you rely on Raytheon or Northrop Grumman for your fire control radar, you're dependent on their upgrade cycles, their export restrictions, and their willingness to share source code. South Korea now controls the entire kill chain, from radar detection to missile launch to battle damage assessment, without asking Washington or Paris for permission. In a simulated engagement, analysts project the KF-21 could detect a J-16, a large, or twin-engine Striker, at roughly 120 miles and maintain a track solid enough to guide a Meteor-class missile. A J-20? That's trickier. Stealth cuts detection range by 70% or more, so the KF-21 might not see a J-20 until it's within 30 to 40 miles. But that's where the numbers game kicks in. If South Korea fields 120 KF-21s networked together, sharing radar data through Link 16 and indigenous data links, they create a distributed sensor web. One jet might not see the J-20, but 10 jets scanning overlapping sectors will triangulate it. And here's the part that kept Chinese planners up at night. South Korea isn't stopping at 120 jets. DAPA has floated the idea of 200 aircraft by 2040, potentially replacing the entire legacy F-16 fleet. That's a standing force of advanced fighters larger than what Taiwan, Japan, or Australia can field in any single theater. Combined with Patriot batteries, Cheonggung surface-to-air missiles, and Aegis destroyers offshore, South Korea is building an integrated air defense network that turns the Yellow Sea into a no-go zone for unescorted Chinese bombers. Most countries build fighters for their own air force and call it a day. South Korea looked at the KF-21 and saw something bigger, a platform they could sell to middle-power nations that can't afford F-35s and don't trust Chinese or Russian jets. The math is compelling. An F-35A costs around $80 million per copy, plus another $30 million in support, infrastructure, and training. A Rafale from France? Close to $90 million. A Eurofighter Typhoon? Over $100 million. The KF-21, according to DAPA estimates, will cost between $55 and $65 million per jet in export configuration. That's a 30% discount compared to Western alternatives, with no political strings attached. Poland is already interested. Their Air Force is modernizing fast, buying F-35s for high-end missions, but looking for a workhorse fighter to replace aging MiG-29s and Su-22s. The KF-21 fits that gap perfectly. Malaysia has expressed interest. They need a replacement for their ancient MiG-29s and can't afford a full F-35 buy. The Philippines, Vietnam, and even Iraq have reportedly held preliminary talks with KAI about future procurement. If South Korea sells even 50 KF-21s to regional partners, they create a de facto coalition of nations flying compatible aircraft, sharing targeting data, and operating under Seoul's technical ecosystem. That's not just an arms sale, it's a strategic alignment. China has tried the same playbook with the J-10CE, selling to Pakistan and pitching to African and Southeast Asian buyers. But the J-10 comes with baggage, dependence on Russian engines, questions about build quality, and the geopolitical risk of aligning with Beijing. The KF-21 offers a third option. Not American, not Chinese, but advanced enough to matter in a regional conflict. And because South Korea controls the intellectual property, they can customize configurations for different buyers without violating U.S. export law. Want a version optimized for maritime strike? Done. Need extra electronic warfare pods for contested airspace? No problem. South Korea is potentially turning a $44 billion domestic program into a revenue-generating export machine that pays for itself while expanding Seoul's influence across the Indo-Pacific. Talk is cheap in the defense industry. Every new fighter promises revolutionary capabilities until it actually has to fly, fight, and survive combat conditions. The KF-21 faced that test in 2023 and 2024, and the results got Beijing's attention. During live-fire trials at the Anhong test range, a KF-21 prototype successfully launched indigenous Meteor class, beyond visual range missiles, likely a variant of South Korea's domestically developed long-range air-to-air weapon. The jet also dropped precision-guided munitions and fired short-range heat-seeking missiles in high G turns. These weren't carefully scripted demos. Engineers pushed the airframe to 9 Gs, tested radar performance under jamming, and simulated combat scenarios against surrogate threats mimicking Chinese and North Korean systems. The jet held together. The avionics worked. The radar tracked targets through interference. Most importantly, the aircraft demonstrated full integration with South Korea's existing command and control architecture, Aegis destroyers, the Patriot batteries, and E-737 AWACS aircraft, proving it could operate as part of a networked force, not just a standalone platform. In mid-2024, South Korea conducted joint air exercises with the US and Japan near the East China Sea. KF-21 prototypes flew alongside F-35s and F-15, practicing intercept scenarios and coordinated strikes. Chinese surveillance aircraft monitored the drills. According to defense analysts, Beijing's takeaway was clear. South Korea is no longer a passive buyer of American jets. They're a peer competitor in regional aerospace, capable of fielding advanced platforms on their own timeline, immune to export embargoes or political pressure from Washington. The KF-21 is not a stealth fighter. In a direct matchup against a J-20 with full sensor fusion and long-range PL-15 missiles, a single KF-21 would likely lose. The J-20 sees first, shoots first, and can disengage before the Korean jet closes the gap. That's the brutal reality of fifth-generation air combat. Stealth breaks the traditional rules of engagement. South Korea knows this. Their answer isn't to out-stealth China. It's to outproduce them and out-network them. If you can't hide, you overwhelm. Field 120 jets by 2032. Upgrade them continuously. Integrate them into a layered defense with surface-to-air missiles, electronic warfare, and allied F-35s. Make it so expensive for China to achieve air superiority that the cost outweighs the benefit. And if that doesn't work, South Korea is already researching unmanned loyal wingmen, AI-controlled drones that fly alongside the KF-21, soaking up enemy missiles and extending sensor range. By 2035, a single manned KF-21 might control 2 or 3 unmanned aircraft, effectively tripling its combat presence without tripling the pilot workload. The question now is, can mass production and networked warfare offset the J-20 stealth advantage, or is South Korea building a brilliant fighter for the last war? So, can South Korea's $44 billion gamble on the KF-21 actually challenge China's air dominance in the Pacific? The answer is yes, but not in the way most people expect. The KF-21 won't win one-on-one dogfights against the J-20. It doesn't need to. What it does is force China to commit more resources, more stealth fighters, and more long-range missiles to secure the same operational objectives they could previously achieve with cheaper fourth-generation jets. That's deterrence through cost imposition. Every J-20 that Beijing sends to suppress South Korean airspace is one less jet available for Taiwan, Japan, or Guam. First, South Korea just became the 8th country capable of indigenous fighter production, and the only US ally in the Pacific with that capability outside of Japan's heavily constrained programs. That's a geopolitical shift. Seoul is no longer a client state in aerospace. They're a supplier, an innovator, and a potential kingmaker for smaller nations choosing sides. Second, the $55 to $65 million price tag makes the KF-21 the most cost-effective advanced fighter on the market. If even 3 or 4 regional powers adopt it, South Korea creates an interoperable coalition that complicates Chinese strike planning across multiple theaters. Beijing can't ignore a distributed force of 200-plus advanced jets spread across South Korea, Poland, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Third, the modular upgrade path means this platform stays relevant for 30 years. Block 2 adds internal weapons bays. Block 3 could integrate directed energy weapons or hypersonic missiles. Unlike a lockdown export F-35, the KF-21 evolves on South Korea's timeline, not Lockheed Martin's. The future stakes are clear. By 2030, the Pacific will see 3 distinct fighter ecosystems competing for dominance: America's F-35 network, China's J-20 fleet, and South Korea's KF-21 coalition. The question now isn't whether South Korea can build a world-class fighter. They already did. The question is whether the rest of the Pacific is paying attention and whether China's next move just got a whole lot harder.